Good morning. Good morning, everyone. And it's good to see you here today. So this morning, I would like to explore with you a chant entitled Enmyō jikku Kannon Sutra, or the Ten-Line Kannon Sutra. I first heard this, I think, at Ramonji Monastery in Decorah, Iowa, and then subsequently at Dharma Rain in Portland, Oregon, and I believe at Upaya also in Santa Fe. So I've heard it a few places. It's widely used in Western Zen traditions now. And I think I'll start just by sharing a recitation of it that is done in the usual percussive style with a accelerating tempo.
Enmyō jikku観音
Kanzeon namu butsu yo butsu en yo butsu en bukpo so en joraku ga jojo nen kanzeon bonen kanzeon nen nen chushin ki nen nen furishin kanzeon namu butsu yo butsu en yo butsu en bukpo so en joraku ga Kanzeon
So one could reasonably ask, okay, this chant is from ancient China, probably the first couple centuries in the Common Era. And one might ask, why recite it? So we'll kind of address that. First of all, an attempt at translation. The chant, as you heard it, was recited in Japanese, and of course, this Japanese was taken from the Chinese chant, and that occurred probably in the early medieval period in Japan. So translation becomes, I say all that just to let you know that translation is speculative. But one translation goes like this: Kanzeon, praise to Buddha, all are one with Buddha, all awake to Buddha, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, timeless, joyous, selfless, pure. Through the day, Kanzeon, through the night, Kanzeon. This moment arises from mind, this moment itself is mind. So there are many other translations, but that is one such translation. The chant is it's 10 lines, which hence the title, but it's also typically repeated 10 times. Okay, so I guess one question is, who is Kanzeon? Kanzeon, or Kannon, there are two different names in Japanese for the same Bodhisattva, is the Bodhisattva of compassion, the Bodhisattva who embodies compassion. And this is the same person or entity we've talked about and called Avalokitesvara in Sanskrit, or Quanyin in Chinese. And Kanzeon then is this figure who may be depicted as either male or female because of shape shifting, which this bodhisattva is capable of. And often depicted with many hands and arms because the bodhisattva, being compassionate, has many skillful means for addressing the various difficulties that humans encounter. All beings encounter, not just humans. So there is the chant was popularized by sects of Buddhism in Japan that focused on the Lotus Sutra as a main text. And in chapter 25 of the Lotus Sutra, the whole chapter is really devoted to Kanzeon, or Avalokitesvara, same individual. And in this chapter, the Buddha is talking about the powers of Avalokitesvara, of Kanzeon. And the Buddha says, hearing her name, seeing her physical form, and calling her to mind is never in vain. For she is able to eliminate the sufferings of existence. For example, those intent on doing harm might throw you into a pit of raging fire by calling to mind the power of the regarder of sounds, another eponym for Avalokitesvara, regarder of sounds. The pit of fire will turn into a pool of water. You might be washed away in a great ocean and imperiled by dragons, fishes, and demons. By calling to mind the power of the regarder of sounds, you will not be drowned in the waves. People might hurl you down from the peak of Mount Sumeru. By calling to mind the power of the regarder of sounds, you will remain suspended in midair like the sun. Being chased by vicious people, you might fall off Mount Diamond. By calling to mind the power of the regarder of sounds, not a single hair on your head will be harmed. You might be surrounded by thieves, all with swords drawn and ready to strike. By calling to mind the power of the regarder of sounds, the hearts of the thieves will all become merciful. You who have incurred the wrath of the king and have been sentenced to execution might stand face to face with death. By calling to mind the power of the regarder of sounds, the executioner's sword will break into pieces. You might be imprisoned, shackled, and chained with arms and legs and fetters and stocks. By calling to mind the power of the regarder of sounds, you will slip free and be released. You might be threatened with curses and poisons. By calling to mind the regarder of sounds, the ill effects will revert to their originators. You might encounter evil rakshasas, venomous dragons, and demons. By calling to mind the power of the regarder of sounds, none will dare harm you. You might be surrounded by ferocious beasts with sharp fangs and menacing claws. By calling to mind the power of the regarder of sounds, the beasts will quickly run far away from you. Lizards, snakes, and scorpions with fiery, poisonous breath might come near you. By calling to mind the power of the regarder of sounds, at the very sound of her name, they will slither away from you. And it goes on like that. So, so how is one to take that? Well, it might be hard for us, just thoroughly infused with scientific materialism, to know what to do with all that. Clearly, it can be taken literally that there is some supernatural power that will allow you to escape all of these dangers if you just call the name or visualize that person. But and quite possibly at the time when this was composed, quite possibly that kind of magical thinking was easier for people because there was more widespread belief in a spiritual world, a world of spirits. But for us now, that might be just hard to take in. But another way of looking at this is that bringing to mind, visualizing, calling out human compassion. And it's always easy to bring something to mind if there is an image associated with it or a sound associated with it. It's the way our brains work. So having some image of this Bodhisattva, Kanzeon, recognizing the sound of the name, will bring to mind and arouse a spirit of compassion that allows us to navigate all difficulties. It's another way of looking at it. Chanting is almost universal in wisdom traditions, chants of various sorts. And it has been a persistent practice throughout millennia. So there are different ways of viewing the value of it. We can view it as a literal invocation to bring compassion into us and into others. We can just view it as a reminder, as a way of aligning our intentions. We can view it as a way of asking for help. Asking for help engenders a spirit of humility, of openness, of vulnerability, which can be helpful regardless of what difficulty we might be facing. Or we could take just a purely materialistic view and think that it stimulates neurotransmitters such as dopamine and oxytocin and helps the brain function more effectively. Does it really matter how we view it? I've come to the point where I don't really think it makes much difference. I've been reciting the Kanzeon chant in my own way daily for a year or two now. And I'm not sure exactly what it does or how it does it, but I find it a useful, a helpful, an orienting practice. And you can look at it as either something to help orient you or an invocation for all beings to be assisted by this spirit of compassion that is locked away someplace in virtually everyone. Compassion is again, translated into English, it's an English translation of other words. One might call it unconditional love. Sometimes it's sort of conflated with this other concept of loving kindness. There may be distinctions between those things, but there's much overlap as well. So whatever is most useful to think about in terms of words is I think the way to think about it. Compassion, unconditional love, kindness, they all have this quality of being beneficial for both the giver and the receiver. So no one loses. So in some ways, these fantastic descriptions from the Lotus Sutra have validity, that in any sort of difficulty, any sort of hardship, that the spirit of compassion for self and other, not just for other, for self as well, this spirit of unconditional love, kindness, have a healing property, have a property of salvation. And no one loses in the process. So I guess I'll leave with the question of, how do you react to this chant or chanting in general? Do you find any resistance to this sort of thing? Or do you have chants or rituals that you regularly use that you have found beneficial? So I'll leave with that, but I'll also chant the Enmyō jikku Kannon Sutra in the way that I usually chant it each morning, a little different. And then we'll go into breakout rooms. Thanks for listening today. So I invite you to just sit in the way you would ordinarily sit if you were meditating. And let your mind settle. Kanzeon namu butsuyo butsu en yo butsu en bubo so en jo rakuga jo chonen kanzeon bonen kanzeon nen jushengi nen burishen. Kanzeon namu butsuyo butsu en yo butsu en bubo so en jo rakuga jo chonen kanzeon bonen kanzeon nen jushengi nen burishen. Kanzeon namu butsuyo butsu en yo butsu en bubo so en jo rakuga jo chonen kanzeon bonen kanzeon nen jushengi nen burishen. Kanzeon namu butsuyo butsu en yo butsu en bubo so en jo rakuga jo chonen kanzeon bonen kanzeon nen jushengi nen burishen. Kanzeon namu butsuyo butsu en yo butsu en bubo so en jo rakuga jo chonen kanzeon bonen kanzeon nen jushengi nen burishen. Kanzeon namu butsuyo butsu en yo butsu en bubo so en jo rakuga jo chonen kanzeon bonen kanzeon nen jushengi nen burishen. Kanzeon namu butsuyo butsu en yo butsu en bubo so en jo rakuga jo chonen kanzeon bonen kanzeon nen jushengi nen burishen. Kanzeon namu butsuyo butsu en yo butsu en bubo so en jo rakuga jo chonen kanzeon bonen kanzeon nen jushengi nen burishen. Kanzeon namu butsuyo butsu en yo butsu en bubo so en jo rakuga jo chonen kanzeon bonen kanzeon nen jushengi nen burishen. Kanzeon namu butsuyo butsu en yo butsu en bubo so en jo rakuga jo chonen kanzeon bonen kanzeon nen jushengi nen burishen. So we'll go into breakout rooms. Thank you for listening today, and be back with you shortly.